So you're thinking about moving to Charleston, South Carolina, and you're starting to wonder about the flooding. How bad is the flooding? What do I need to know? What is this stuff I'm hearing about flood zones? What does that mean? How do I avoid flood zones? All of these very understandable and relevant questions. Today, I'm exploring all of this with you. I'm going to break down the flood zones. We're going to talk about insurance. Do you need it? Do you don't? How much does it cost? What goes into factoring all of this? If you are seriously considering moving here, this is a topic that is very important. I get asked a lot about this as a realtor here. Pretty much every client moving from out of state is asking me about the flood zones because it is fairly confusing. So today we're going to simplify it. Let's go ahead and get into the video. Hi, I'm Sarah. I'm a realtor here in Charleston, South Carolina, and I love helping people buy and sell real estate every single day. So if you are moving in 9 days or 90 days, please feel free to give me a call, shoot me a text, or send me an email, and I would absolutely love to help you make your smooth move to Charleston. Okay, so a lot of people moving here will say, Sarah, I want to find a home that is not in a flood zone. And I hate to break it to you, but literally all of Charleston is a flood zone. It's not possible to find a home that is not in a flood zone. We are called the Low Country after all, and we have low elevation. So no matter where you are in our area, you're going to be in some kind of a flood zone. The difference comes in how much of a risk you have for flooding. So there are different zones that give you some rough idea of how risky of a location your particular home is. These zones are designated by FEMA, and they give you an indication of your particular risk. The zone also helps determine your flood insurance, so there are many other factors that we will get into later for that particular topic, as well as the building regulations required in that area. The first flood zone is X. X is your most minimal, lowest risk flood zone. We love to see X when we're looking at properties. This equates to about a 0.2% to 1% risk annually of flooding. The next flood zone is AE. This is also very common here. It's not super scary to see this. It's a more moderate risk of flooding. This works out to a 1% risk annually. Now, over a 30-year period, this works out to a 20% risk in that 30-year term. So there is a chance, about 1 in 5, that over 30 years of living in the home that you could have some flooding. The next zone is V. This is where it starts to get into a higher risk, as well as A, which I don't really tend to see around here, but it is a flood zone that's also a higher risk. And then the highest risk flood zone is called VE. We kind of joke that it stands for very expensive, which of course it doesn't, but when it comes to flood insurance, that's going to be your most expensive zone. These are your super high risk areas, like if you're oceanfront, for example. So how do you figure out what zone you're in? Well, you can go to FEMA's website, but you can also look at the tax record. That's what I usually do as an agent looking at properties, is I pull up the tax record for that particular house, and most of the time the flood zone is indicated there. Now this is super, super important. The only flood zone where you do not have to have flood insurance is in an X flood zone. That's the one that's the most minimal risk. Now, if you're paying cash for a house, it's up to you whether or not you want flood insurance. I would always recommend it no matter what your flood zone is. But if you are financing a loan with a lender, with a bank, then you are going to be required to have flood insurance if you are in an AE flood zone or above. Now, if you have a pre-approval in hand with a certain budget, let's just say you're pre-approved for a home up to $400,000, the flood insurance is not worked into this figure. So it's very important to understand that and know that if you're looking at a home outside of the X flood zone, that you're going to have to pay a little bit higher every single month with your monthly payment in order to include flood insurance into your cost. Flood insurance is a different insurance from homeowners. Homeowners is a policy, and flood insurance is an additional type of policy. You need to get estimates from a trusted insurance agent. We're going to talk a little bit more about that later. But for now, know that this is something that you can do during your due diligence phase. After you go under contract, there's an agreed amount of time between the parties of how long you have to look into different aspects, doing your due diligence, and insurance is one of the things at the top of the list. So I'd always recommend getting multiple quotes for both homeowners insurance and flood insurance during this window so you can ensure that you're comfortable with the payments. There is no contingency in the contract to get out of the contract due to cost of flood insurance or any insurance for that matter. So you need to ensure that you are looking into this during this window of time when you still have the opportunity to cancel the contract if the costs are just outrageous and more than what you were expecting and you can't afford it or you just simply don't want to pay that amount. If you want to understand more about contracts and contingencies and how to actually buy a house, check out this video on how to buy a house, and I walk you through everything A to Z so that you can be fully prepared moving into this process. Now, flood insurance is a national program regulated by FEMA. The FEMA risk rating calculates your particular risk at a specific address. So it's pretty wild because sometimes two people who are literally neighbors living next to each other could actually be in different flood zones or have different risk calculations. Well, why is that? There are so many reasons. Here are just a few of what goes into the risk calculations. The flood frequency, the flood type, the distance to a water source, what type of water is it, the topography of the land, the slope of your particular lot, the home rebuild cost. So if your home was to get damage, how much is it going to cost to fix it? So therefore, things like how many stories it is and the square footage come into play. The age of the roof is really important. The type of foundation is important. Is it elevated? We have a lot of elevated homes here, and that obviously helps decrease your risk of flooding. Speaking of elevation, elevation means your height above the base flood elevation. That's what they're looking at. We have something called an elevation certificate that measures this. You don't have to have this for insurance, but it can be really helpful. If the certificate is favorable, then you can actually get a credit towards your flood insurance. Some neighborhoods also have water retention ponds or some sort of drainage system worked into the plan. So all of this goes into how the risk is calculated. Now let's talk about getting coverage. You have two options. You can either get coverage through FEMA or through a private insurance carrier. FEMA covers up to $250,000, so if you want higher coverage, you'll need to go through a private insurance carrier. Also, sometimes going the private route is more affordable. Now, sometimes the policies are even assumable and transferable, meaning if the current seller already has a flood insurance policy, usually you can transfer it and assume it as the new buyer of that home. Now, you wouldn't be able to do this if the insurance is with a company like USAA, which is only available to those members, but most insurance carriers are not member restricted. Sometimes it can save you money to assume the policy. FEMA as well gives a discount to the buyer if the seller has a current policy. So this is something you can ask the current owner for, and then you can send that policy to your insurance agent or to FEMA and see if you can get the discount. All right, so I'm sure you're wondering, how much is this actually going to cost me? I'll be honest, the rates did go up in 2023. A lot of carriers pulled out of South Carolina as well as many other states in the Southeast due to the risk of hurricanes and some of the natural disasters that we've seen over recent years. So flood insurance does cost more than it used to. There are also other variables that go into your cost, like is this your primary residence or your second home? Is it an investment property? How high is your deductible? What is your personal property coverage? All of this is going to determine how much this costs you on a monthly or annual basis. Now, I kind of hate to give exact numbers because it could vary widely for you based on all of the variables that I've mentioned today and many more, but just to give you a rough estimate, in an X-flood zone, you could be looking at about $600 per year should you choose to take out a policy, which is about $50 a month. So for me, I will personally always have flood insurance. It's totally worth $50 a month or more, but it's up to you since you don't need it in an X flood zone. In the AE zone, it's going to be maybe $600 on the low end, maybe up to $1,800. And then for VE, I don't even want to throw out a number. It's going to be many thousands of dollars in that very high risk zone. Now, here are some tips on how to actually decide on your insurance coverage. I highly recommend shopping your insurance. FEMA's rates are the same across the board since it's a government regulated agency, but the private insurance carriers' rates are going to vary dramatically. Also, different local agents are going to have different companies that give them different rates, so I always recommend getting at least 3 different quotes. Another tip is that you can actually oftentimes bundle and save. So you can bundle with your car insurance, if you have a boat, a golf cart, any type of umbrella policy. All of this can get bundled and often save you 10 to 20%. Something I just learned is that this can even be bundled across different companies, but via the same insurance agent. So this means that your flood insurance might actually be with a different company than your homeowner's insurance, but if you're purchasing them both through the same insurance agent, then you can still save money. This is called a companion policy. Sometimes you can also get credits for things like a newer roof, if you have hurricane impact glass or hurricane shutters. Anything about your specific home that can help mitigate loss is a big plus. So those are some tips on how you might be able to save some money on your flood insurance and your homeowner's insurance as well. I know a few really great local insurance agents here, so if you would like a referral, I'd be happy to connect you. Just email me and I will make the introduction. Okay, so that wraps up everything you need to know about flood zones and flood insurance here in Charleston, South Carolina. If I can help you in your buying and selling journey, then I would be honored to earn your business. All of my contact information is pinned below in the comments and in the description, and I really look forward to helping you make your smooth move to Charleston. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments below, and if you found this video helpful, I would be super grateful if you would like it, subscribe to the channel so you can be the first one to know about all things Charleston, and until I meet you in person, I will see you in the next video. Thank you so much for watching.